I want to talk about the harsh reality of my first software engineering job. I think I talked about a little bit about my first job in a previous video, but I really want to go in detail as to what I felt and thought in my first job. So, coming out of school, I had an internship and then I got a full time software developer job. And I stayed at this place actually for 4.5 years. But that first 3 months was extraordinarily difficult in this job. Not from the technical side, because I felt like I had people to show me and help me with certain things, but it was extraordinarily difficult in mentally. It was such a hard mental hurdle to get over. The fact that I once was, able to go outside and hang out with people and, go do things. Now I'm sitting in a room with no windows and it's dim and I'm behind a screen for 8 hours a day. That I still remember how I felt 5.5 years ago, and I never want to feel that way again because I felt like I made a mistake getting into programming. I felt like I made a mistake getting into this career, and I had zero motivation and incentive to learn anything outside my job. I was just so draining and taxing mentally that I had really had no energy left outside of the job to put towards learning and developing the skills that I thought once was cool 4 months ago. Like all the stuff that I thought was really cool, I no longer cared anything about. And it happened so quickly. And I think that the speed at which my mentality changed or shifted was startling to me. And I remember I'm like, okay, I have to do something. And what I ultimately resorted to was I went on walks down by this river like they had with like a sidewalk next to it. I would walk down there for at least 20 minutes. And I remember thinking, I'm like, oh man, they're probably thinking I'm like going out for 20 minutes, like just goofing off, I'm just going on too many walks and taking too many breaks and stuff. This is what I thought because everybody's just in that room, like they're just like sitting there, like at their screens. And shouldn't I be doing that all day for 8 hours too? It was extraordinarily difficult. Another tweak I had to make to try to alleviate this feeling was getting to work early. And some people get to work at 9 and leave at 6. Some people 8 to 5. I started to get to work at 7, and I would leave at 3:30. And for me, this was the best thing I could have done, I think, to help me mentally, because getting to work early when nobody's there and there's no distractions, in the office, there's no people that you can hear or people nearby. It just helps you get into a better state, especially because you're going to be there and you're going to see those people for like a while. Like you just need that time in the morning to yourself. You know what I mean? And then I would leave at 3:30. That way I could miss some traffic driving home, which I did miss a lot of traffic, which was nice. But it was around noon when the feelings were just overwhelming as to, I made a mistake. I messed up. I picked the wrong career. I need to go and get into woodworking or do something like outside or something like that. Like I went as far as to look at job listings for just random stuff as a way to try to get me out of this room. Like I just had to get out of the room. I was going crazy. But I would look at other offices and I would kind of compare them to offices I've also seen, and they're all just so similar. You just have a cubicle, you have your screens, and you just have an open environment, and it's just people are just sitting there behind their screens. It just seemed like there was no break, and it seemed like that was going to be life for the next 40 years. And I'm like, is this it? And I know I've said that in a previous video, but that's crucial I have to get that across in order to articulate the harsh reality of getting this first software engineering job. And what I would do, I would listen to YouTube videos talking about people talking about leaving, like the matrix of like screens, and people talking about how the 9 to 5 is like is bad for your mental health and things like that. I would just listen to things that would try to get my mind out of this reality of actually being in a 9 to 5 behind a screen, and try to get myself into another spot. I would do that, and then I also I got this calendar. And it was a weekly calendar. It was like a post-it note stack of these calendars you could tear off. You could write stuff on there. Well, I got a stack, and this actually I had gotten it from one of my previous internships, and it was a finite stack of paper. It was like 150 pages or something. I said to myself, okay, by the time I fill up all this calendar, all these sticky notes, by the time I go through these 150 pages, I am going to be in a different job than where I am at now. I'm going to be doing something else aside from just sitting behind these screens, typing and just feeling like I made a mistake. And I would tear those pages out every week. And as I watched the stack get smaller, I was no closer to making any switch. And it was around that time, I'd been there 5 or 6 months, that we actually moved offices into an open office environment. That helped a little bit because at least I had windows, but it didn't help me escape that feeling. And I just saw myself, okay, I'm no closer to getting another job. I'm no closer to switching before this stack of paper, runs out. What do I do? And it was around that time when everybody went remote, and me going remote, I think, was the best thing that could have happened in the context of my job in software engineering. I think going remote completely changed how I looked at the job, because no longer did I have to commute. I didn't have to sit in a dimly lit office. I didn't have to go and heat up my lunch that I just like pre-packed in the morning in a rush. I didn't have to wake up at 5:30 to sit in traffic for 45 minutes. I got an hour and a half of my day back. This was transformational for me. This was revolutionary. Working remotely, I mean, that changed everything. Well, I knew once we went remote, I knew that I could no longer work in an office. That just wasn't for me. I had to continue working remotely. From then on, as I worked remote, I slowly started to get enthusiasm back about software engineering, and I started to slowly get back into reading books, working on some just small side projects to test out different technologies. But it was all, I think, because working remotely. And I think that it just put me in such a better mental spot, because I was at home, I was in an environment I was comfortable in, and I wasn't just I wasn't in the office surroundings that just constantly reminded me that this is what I'm going to be doing for, the next 40 years, if that makes sense. And I know it sounds kind of like bleak or whatever, but I think that you have to be prepared going into this first job of the harshness that the first job, the reality can be for the first software engineering job. Because regardless of what videos you see of how crazy it is, or how cool the offices are, or whatever it is, you are still going to face your own you're still going to face your own mind. And you have to be prepared for where your mind may go when you're sitting at that screen 3 months in, you can't figure out the problem, and you start questioning your entire life decisions up to this point. It's coming. You have to be ready for that moment, and you have to be prepared to make some kind of adjustment to get around that. For me, it was going remote. For you, it might be going remote. It might be going into an office. It might be doing something. I don't know what it is, but you have to be ready for that moment. And that's I think the harsh reality is that that moment is coming, and that you're going to face that mental battle that you have to win. And software engineering, unfortunately, it can be very isolating because sometimes you get so buried in your own problems that you lose sight of everything else. And when you get so deep into a problem, it becomes that much harder to bring somebody into the problem to help you, that you feel like you can't ask for help, or you can't bring anyone else into the problem. And then you feel alone or stuck in the problem. And that's where you're at your weakest. And if I could redo things early on in my career, the biggest thing that I would do differently is ask for help earlier on. And I would try to vocalize where I'm at in a project, and I would try to bring people in and just share with them maybe problems I'm going through in this particular code or task I have, not because I'm looking for help, but when that time comes that you get stuck, knowing that people are aware of it and is having that support is huge, and it's super helpful. So I think I would do that differently. But again, for me, and I think for others, that is the reality. Like it's a startling. It can be a startling transition, and you have to be ready for it, and you have to make lifestyle decisions that I think will help you to get around, the adjustment, because the bulk of my day is sitting at a desk coding or on meetings or things like that. And that's the job. It's as you get more experience, you start to honestly do less code. It seems like you're in a lot more meetings, which I think helps. But for that first part, if you're just grinding through code, it can be really taxing mentally. So I think that's all I wanted to say about the harsh reality of software engineering. But on the upside, there's still a lot of opportunity, and I think that there's a lot you can do with it, but it just depends on how you go about it. So anyway, that's what I wanted to talk about today. Hopefully that wasn't too depressing. I'll see you on the next one.